Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would do this little video and talk about this little topic that I found very particularly interesting. And in this video, what we're going to be talking about is, of course, yet again another boxing scene or another overall boxing video. And this is mainly going to entail, and I've already kind of talked about this a multitude of times within the past couple of weeks, probably even past few weeks. But at the current moment, we're going to be talking about boxing's current top 10 pound for pound list, which of course is really one of the hardest things to rank, at least to a certain degree, because the pound for pound list really overall, no matter what list that you have, really, depending on the sport, it's always going to be, in some sort of ways objective, but also in certain ways it's going to be subjective. Because, of course, everyone has a little bit of a different perspective. They have a little bit of a different view. But make no mistake about it, in my view, there is a way to at least make somewhat of an objective list. At least if there is consistency, if you seem to have somewhat of logical and factual information, certain things to where your rankings make sense. And, this could be anywhere from the NFL, top 10 list to NBA or boxing, whatever it may be. But at the current moment in time, especially in the sport of boxing, what I do notice is that I do not believe that a lot of people, and this really goes for a lot of sports fans in general, I do not believe them overall to be super highly logical or objective, to be honest with you. The majority of people out there that you meet, they're not going to be that logical and that objective. And I do not view myself as a super duper emotional person. I rank things logically and objectively, especially when it comes to that of the sports realm. And the reason why that is because I think that everyone deserves a certain amount of credit. And I cannot put a person above another person that I believe overall has that of a better resume or has more accomplishments in his career or overall has come up bigger in that of the bigger moments. It's the same reason why I have that of Tom Brady over Aaron Rodgers. It's the same reason why I have Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and maybe even a couple of other NBA players over that of LeBron James. So it just is what it is. But anyways, we're not only going to be talking about ESPN's top 10 pound for pound list at the current moment in time, we're also going to be talking about Mr. Champside's current top 10 pound for pound list. And Champside, of course, for those of you that don't know, or for those of you that may be new to the channel or the boxing scene, Champside is a part of a media called that of New Media. And New Media, I think, all in all, that what they do, and listen, I get it, I think that it is a great thing to cover black fighters, especially in that of a greater light, because do they sometimes have to deal with that of discriminatory, media or certain things, maybe castigating against them? I think that you certainly can debate that, no doubt about it. But listen, at the end of the day, you do have to be logical and you do have to be objective. And Champside is also going to show his top 10 pound for pound list. But unfortunately, Champside, just like that of any of the other channels that I do tend to review, whether it be Dante's Boxing Nation, whether it be Boxing Eagle, whether it be Aki TV, whether it be Southpaw 773, whether it be even the Blue Blood Sports TV, unfortunately, these channels, in my view, at least the majority of them, they're just not super duper reliable. And the reason why that is because they're caught overall in being mainly racially biased and super emotional because they believe that they've been somewhat victimized and discriminated against. And listen, I get it. But at the end of the day, even when that type of stuff happens, and we've all been discriminated against in some sort of way, but at the end of the day, you can't argue that certain people or certain others get discriminated against more. But at the end of the day, you have to keep your emotions in check. And you overall have to be logical and objective. That is the best way to be. And unfortunately, I do not believe that a lot of these people are. And at the end of the day, just like some of those pro-racial Caucasians or pro-racial Latinos, they're no better. And they pretty much have created a pro-black cult called that of New Media. Because that pretty much is all what they are. You notice basically when you take a look at their top 10 pound for pound list, you're going to notice a very, very similar pattern. So it just is what it is. And listen, once again, I think that it is a great thing to cover black fighters in a greater light than what sometimes they are covered in. Okay, I get it. But at the end of the day, you do have to be logical. You do have to be objective. And when it comes to the top 10 pound per pound list, or even when it comes to ranking things, we can talk about Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, or we can talk about the NBA, for example. You don't know how many Aaron Rodgers fans I've seen over the years basically state that Aaron Rodgers, that in their opinion, that he is the greatest quarterback of all time. And that Aaron Rodgers, that he clearly is greater than Tom Brady because take a look at his touchdown to interception ratio and the talent that he has. I don't care how talented you are. If you cannot lead a team even to a second Super Bowl appearance, while the other player, comparing him to Tom Brady, of course, while the other player not only has 10 Super Bowl appearances, but 7 Super Bowl wins, and also multiple MVPs, what can you really do to compete with that? You can't. So I really don't care about how talented you are. What I care about is production. Now, don't get me wrong. If the argument is close, then we do have to talk about talent. We do have to talk about those little things when we're splitting hairs. But that's more of a conversation if we were to talk about football with Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. Another little story that I'll talk about before I start this video, just to talk about some NBA basketball. I remember a few years ago, and this was when Stephen Curry was a multiple-time NBA champion. Stephen A. Smith was actually trying to debate, and he was not the only one trying to debate this. He actually debated that Anthony Davis was above that of a Mr. Stephen Curry. And I've also had certain people tell me recently, as I've released these videos, that in my view, now that Stephen Curry has won his 4th NBA championship, there is no doubt in my mind he does have to be counted over that of Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant has never been as impactful as that of a Stephen Curry, especially as a leader. Not even close. And Stephen Curry has won 2 championships without him, while Kevin Durant has never won a ring without him. But what people will basically tell you is that, well, the one-on-one and all this sort of stuff, right, but if you don't have the production, if you don't have the impact, if you don't have the resume as another player, especially in that of a team sport, then how can I put you above that person? It just doesn't make any sense. So it just is what it is. And I remember the same thing with Anthony Davis. Because Anthony Davis looks so damn talented within that of the NBA, because of his defense, because of his offensive ability, especially as a center or a power forward, Anthony Davis truly looked to be the next up-and-coming MVP, and a lot of people actually believe that he was going to be the #1 player in the world later on. But then, of course, that never came to be. And the only way that Anthony Davis was ever actually able to win a championship was when he was second banana to that of LeBron James. Well, boxing, of course, is a little bit different because it is an individual sport. But my point being is this. When it comes to your top 10 pound-for-pound list, you can't just rank it off of basically who you believe are the most talented fighters in the world. Now, if you want to make that list, then you can make a list, another individual list, basically stating that I believe that these fighters will be the next 10 best up-and-coming fighters in the world. I believe that these fighters are the 10 most talented and skilled fighters in the world. Then you can make that list, and that basically is your own opinion. But when you talk about a top 10 pound-for-pound list, or if we're talking about the all-time greats list, we not only have to go off of talent, we also have to go off of productivity. We also have to go off of what they accomplished. We also have to go off of basically the resume and who they beat. And I don't care what anybody says, resume and accomplishments, in my view, they're always going to be out the skill set and the talent, because you never truly know how talented and how skilled someone is until expectations and pressure get to that person. That's why even with the most talented certain athletes in the world, Aaron Rodgers will never be a Tom Brady. There are certain throws that Aaron Rodgers can make that Tom Brady in his dreams could never even try to attempt to make. But he'll never be a Tom Brady because Aaron Rodgers cannot live up to the pressure the same way that a Tom Brady can. All right, there are certain things that Anthony Davis can do that maybe even a Kevin Durant and Stephen Curry can do, but overall he will never be on their level because Anthony Davis cannot do those things as a leader. And in terms of leading a basketball overall team to that of the playoffs or that to a championship, he pretty much was abysmal before he ended up going with LeBron James. So that pretty much overall is my point here. But anyways, let's get into the video. Let's see what Mr. Champside has to say. Let's also see what the ESPN pound-for-pound list is. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what they have to say.
Not even 2 weeks after being placed at number 10 on ESPN's pound-for-pound rankings, Devin the Dream Haney has been removed from their pound-for-pound list. And now, just 2 weeks later, Artur Beterbiev, who they never had on their pound-for-pound list, has entered on the list at number 7. And Lomachenko has moved down to number 9, with Shakur Stevenson taking Devin Haney's spot. So Shakur went down, Lomachenko went down, Artur Beterbiev appeared, right?
Listen, what I'll state is this. And of course, Champside, because once again, he is very, very racially motivated, and unfortunately, he has a victim mindset. And when you have a victim mindset, whenever overall someone tries to provide an argument, you're basically going to look at it from a victim mindset, and that's overall someone of being a fanboy. It's kind of like if you're Shannon Sharp and you want to talk about LeBron James. Whenever someone says something critical of LeBron James, Shannon Sharp, he never takes it overall from a logical and objective perspective. He always takes it as a personal attack. And it's kind of the same thing with Champside. Now, don't get me wrong. Is there some discriminatory acts, or is there some racial, issues going on maybe behind the scenes at ESPN, or, do they sometimes try to put certain fighters on the top 10 pound per pound list, to kind of exclude that of black fighters? You can certainly debate that. I don't have a problem with that. But listen, at the end of the day, you have to know depending on who you are, you have to know overall who truly deserves to be within those rankings and who really doesn't. And if we're talking about Artur Beterbiev and Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson, if we're just talking about all of them, in my view, just in terms of their all-around, ability for their divisions and in terms of all their resume, they're pretty much right there with each other. Now, of course, some people, they'll take a look at me and they'll say, oh, well, you're insane. Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney, they're 10 times more skilled than what Artur Beterbiev is. Well, can we truly allege that? Because Artur Beterbiev, in his last fight, he fought a multiple-time champion, and that of Joe Smith Jr., and he completely dismantled him in under 2 rounds. So Artur Beterbiev obviously has some sort of championship pedigree. No, he doesn't look as slick, and he doesn't look overall as good of a mover as some of those other fighters. But for the light heavyweight division, he probably is the best light heavyweight in the world, either him or Dimitri Bivol. Let's also not forget his wins over Marcus Brown, who was a very decently slick fighter. Artur Beterbiev was able to completely make him crumble, and he was able to knock him out, a former champion within that division. And the one loss that Marcus Brown did have, Marcus Brown overall ended up losing, I believe, a split decision or something like that to that of Jean Pascal. To where, of course, he did not put on the best performance, but we all knew that Marcus Brown was a very decently talented fighter. And at least he was not knocked out in his last fight. Artur Beterbiev was the first one to ever put him away. So it is what it is. And then, of course, you had Oleksandr, who was coming off of a great win over the little bit older Adonis Stevenson within his career. He had a knockout victory. And there might even be one other person I'm personally forgetting. Artur Beterbiev is no joke. So to put Artur Beterbiev over Devin Haney, we need to ask ourselves this question. For those of us that are logical and objective, is this a move to where ESPN is doing this because they're doing it because they do not want another black fighter on the top 10 pound per pound list? Or is it actually somewhat debatable that maybe Artur Beterbiev could be that over Devin Haney? Well, I think all in all that you could maybe debate that it's a little bit of both, and I understand the perspective, but listen, at the end of the day, Artur Beterbiev, you could certainly debate is within the top 10 pound per pound, just as you could debate with Devin Haney, just as you could debate with Shakur Stevenson, and maybe even a Jermell Charlo. And I'm going to be talking about Jermell Charlo once again because so many people, for whatever reason, they always want to put Jermell Charlo on this super duper high level, when really, in my view, he really does not deserve to be, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Artur Beterbiev, you could certainly debate on the top 10 pound per pound list, because if we're talking about a championship caliber fighter that all in all, has not lost as of yet and looks to be the most dominant fighter on the planet, it's either Artur Beterbiev or it's Naoya Inoue. Now, some people may say that of Devin Haney, some people may say that of, also Shakur Stevenson. And Shakur Stevenson, I'll give him credit. He certainly has looked dominant, but the only real A-grade fighter that he really ever fought in his career was that of an Oscar Valdez. And don't get me wrong, that's a fantastic win. That is not, that's not just peanuts. That's not to be undermined. But at the end of the day, Artur Beterbiev, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Dimitri Bivol, this year, he's the only one in my view that has to be now locked within the top 10 pound per pound. And the reason why that is because he defeated Canelo Alvarez, and he pretty much put on, I don't want to say master class, because I don't think that Canelo, to be honest with you, I don't think that Canelo was really putting up the best strategy, but he did put on a very, very good performance. I thought that he won 8 rounds to 4. So, if you know my pound per pound list, you know my rules. If you end up beating, a top 10 pound per pound fighter, especially as high in the caliber of what Canelo Alvarez is and was, you're going to have to be on my top 10 pound per pound list. Shakur Stevenson, Artur Beterbiev, who the hell else would I put up there? Jermell Charlo, all those guys right now, I think they're kind of in their own jumble. They're anywhere from 9 to 11, But anyway.
And Lomachenko still hanging on these lists with a loss to Salido in his second fight, with a loss to Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez went on.
And I do agree with Mr. Champside, and I've said this in other videos, that I do not agree with Vasily Lomachenko, in my personal view, being on the top 10 pound-for-pound list at the current moment in time. But let's also talk about Vasily Lomachenko really quickly, because a lot of people, especially of this new media caliber, just like certain others, may try to degrade certain black fighters or overall make it seem like they're nothing. They try to make Vasily Lomachenko, make him seem like he's nothing. Vasily Lomachenko has a multitude of A-grade wins for the divisions that he was in. Not only was he able to defeat Jorge Linares when he pretty much was at the best point of his career, he was able to make Nicholas Walters quit when he was an undefeated fighter and looked at as an A-grade fighter. He was able to completely embarrass Guillermo Rigondeaux, who once upon a time, when he did beat him, was ranked as a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. He also completely embarrassed that of Gary Russell Jr., so it's not like Vasily Lomachenko just has a bunch of bums on his resume. Lomachenko does have an A-grade resume, there is no doubt about that. But what I will say is this, in my view, at the current moment in time, I would not put him on my top 10 pound-for-pound list because he has no belts. And if you're a person that, in my view, has no belts, you probably are not going to be allowed to be on my top 10 pound-for-pound list unless you have a resume that is just so out of this world great, like literally first ballot future Hall of Fame. Now, I do think that Lomachenko, in my view, is a future Hall of Famer. And the reason why I state that is because in the Boxing Hall of Fame, in my view, I don't think that it takes that much to get in. I even think fighters like that of Azab Judah, a Paulie Malignaggi, and Adrian Broner deserve to be in the Boxing Hall of Fame. So would I say that any of those fighters were ever on the peak level of a Vasily Lomachenko? No, not even close. So at the end of the day, Lomachenko is a great fighter. There's no denying that, at least if you're a logical and objective person. But we need to see how he comes back. And if he ends up defeating that of a Devin Haney, or that of a Gervonta Tank Davis, or something overall of that caliber, then once again he will grace my top 10 pound-for-pound list, but not until. Because the last big A-grade fight that you did have, you ended up losing to Teofimo Lopez. Depending on whether you think there was an injury or not, is what it is. He ended up losing. And second off, when it comes down to it, you don't have any belts. So I cannot have you currently on my top 10 pound-for-pound list.
To lose his titles to George Kambosos, who made a brief entrance on their pound-for-pound list as well. But when Devin Haney defeats...
And George Kambosos was never on my top 10 pound-for-pound list. And some people may, say, oh, well, some people may think overall that I'm putting double standards out there. No, George Kambosos was never on my top 10 pound-for-pound list. Now, like I said, whoever was going to defeat him next was going to have to be on my top 10 pound-for-pound list because George Kambosos beat Teofimo, but because I thought that it was a very poor performance from Teofimo Lopez, I put George Kambosos within my top 15. But Devin Haney beating George Kambosos and becoming completely unified, that put him within my top 10, probably within the final two slots, final 2 or 3. But, once again, the pound-for-pound list right now, I believe, is so very competitive. But anyway.
Kambosos in an undisputed match. They are missing now 2 undisputed champions. Press 1. But everyone would rather complain about the order and I would have this person there and there on.
Now take a look at this top 10 pound-for-pound list. And this is why I could not really respect a pound-for-pound list like this. Now both Errol Spence and Terence Bud Crawford being within the top 2, I don't really mind that. I really don't have a problem with that. As I've already stated a multitude of times, both of those fighters are within my top 5 pound-for-pound. But then for whatever reason they have Jermell Charlo with 3. I really have no idea why the hell Jermell Charlo would ever be on someone's top 5 pound-for-pound list. There's so many of these guys from new media, especially, that always try to spoon feed you this bullshit about how, he unified one of the most talented divisions. That talented was ripe with weak and defeated champions. It just is what it is. And listen, Jermell Charlo, he's an A- fighter in my opinion. He is a decently great fighter, but he's not top 5 pound-for-pound. He's not on the Errol Spence level. He's not on the Terence Bud Crawford level. There's a couple of other fighters even on this list I would not put him above. And then you have Shakur Stevenson at 4. And I believe that Shakur, he may be on my top 10 pound for pound list, but I can't have him at 4. He is a two-weight division champion. He did just recently defeat Oscar Valdez, and he is extraordinarily talented. But in order for you to be within my top 5 pound for pound, at least within the times that we are now, you probably are going to have to defeat multiple A-plus fighters, or at least a multitude of A, or maybe even one A-plus fighter, like that of what a Canelo Alvarez did, like that what of a Tyson Fury did for his weight division, like that of Oleksandr Usyk, a Terrence Crawford, and that of an Errol Spence Jr., you're going to have to defeat, very decent level competition. So that's why those 5 fighters that I just mentioned, Usyk, Fury, Crawford, Spence, and that of Alvarez, Canelo, they're all within my top 5 because their resumes and their all-around game, in my view, they're all the most complete within the boxing scene at the current moment in time. But then, of course, you have Devin Haney, which in my view, he would not be top 5, but I would somewhat understand it. Gervonta Tank Davis, once again, he is now off my top 10 pound per pound list because he has not really fought anyone, in my view, as of lately, that is really worth that much of a while. And to be honest with you, he pretty much majorly underperformed in my eyes within those last 2 performances. He did not look that good, and to be honest with you, you can debate that the last 2 opponents that he fought were C-grade competition. I would say that Isaac Pitbull Cruz probably was about a B level fighter, but Rolly Romero was about a C plus. There's nothing that Rolly Romero had besides power to really threaten Gervonta Tank Davis with. He had no boxing ability whatsoever. But then, of course, we get to the real issues like that of a Jerome Boots Ennis. Now, Jerome Boots Ennis, for how talented that he is, once again, and this goes back to my point from the beginning of the video, I don't care how talented someone seems to be, you cannot be on my top 10 pound per pound list. You cannot overall be ranked above someone that, in my view, has a greater resume than you. And having Jerome Boots Ennis on your list, I mean, in my view, that's just embarrassing. I mean, really, how can you really debate that someone is actually legitimately on your top 10 pound per pound list in terms of the all-around game, when overall, basically what you're saying is that, well, I believe that he's the most talented. He's never even won a belt in his career. He's never even won an official belt in his career. I don't even have Vasily Lomachenko on my pound per pound list. I don't even have a couple of other fighters that I possibly could put up there because they may not have belts at the moment. How can you really legitimately put Jerome Boots Ennis, who's never even won an official belt within his career, on your top 10 pound per pound list? So once again, this just goes to prove my point once again. And I get these certain people on my channel that disagree. It just is what it is. They're just the facts of the situation. New media, even though I think that it's a great thing that they try to cover black fighters in a greater light, they're pretty much overall no better than that of CNN News. It just is what it is. All right, they're pretty much overall the pro-black mafia. That's really all they are. All right, the pro-black fighters league. All right, that is all they are. And then once again, notice the only Caucasian fighter, and I've said this a multitude of times for those of you that have paid attention to my videos, notice the only Caucasian fighter that they have on here is Josh Taylor. Now, when some of you may ask, well, why is that? Why is the only Caucasian fighter that they have on here is Josh Taylor? I've already told a multitude of people this why, but I'll say it again. The reason why they have Josh Taylor up on their pound per pound list and no other Caucasian fighters, like that of a Lomachenko, and you can debate that he does not deserve to be on here, but notice they don't even have someone like Oleksandr Usyk. Someone apparently undisputed is very important to them. Well, Oleksandr Usyk not only went undisputed within the cruiserweight division, he just defeated Anthony Joshua, who was a very decently, A-grade fighter in my view, and 20 pounds bigger. You're telling me that Oleksandr Usyk somehow does not make a top 10 pound per pound list? Like, come on. But Josh Taylor somehow does. Josh Taylor is somehow still on the top 10 pound per pound list when he probably should have lost his last fight against Jack Catterall. And you're telling me that Oleksandr Usyk does not make a pound per pound list. Now, another rule that Champside does have on his pound per pound list is that he does not put alleged drug cheats in here. So that would be why Canelo Alvarez and Tyson Fury not here, which whatever, if that's your rules, then no problem. But the only issue that I have with that is that certain people that go by that rule, they all of a sudden change that rule when it comes to certain fighters that they like. So those same people who usually call Shane Mosley or Roy Jones Jr., all-time great fighters. Once again, if you're a person that believes that, drug cheats should not get overall, the credit, no problem. For me, it's really tough to just go all in that because I think that this is pretty much a very heavily used steroid era. So if you're talking about, fighters that do not deserve credit because they were caught on steroids, no problem. Not only do not give credit to Canelo and allegedly Tyson Fury, Also, don't give credit to that of Roy Jones Jr., Manny Pacquiao. Don't give credit to Sugar Shane Mosley. Stop calling those guys all-time great fighters. Stop calling them that. Because all those fighters, I believe, were caught on some sort of PED. But anyway, Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, I believe, at one point in time. But if I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. But once again, the reason why they have Josh Taylor on this pound-for-pound list is because if Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence were able to beat them, they could say all in all that, that Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence beat a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. So that's the, once again, you notice that a lot of the Caucasoid or a lot of the Latino fighters that they overall know 100% for sure are clearly the best of that division, they don't have on this list. They don't have Tyson Fury on the list. They don't have Oleksandr Usyk on the list. And they really tried very, very hard not to put Canelo on the list. And now, overall, that Canelo lost his last fight, they'll try to say that he's not top 10 pound per pound, which I cannot abide by because Canelo Alvarez, his resume is really out of this world. And he still is undisputed at the 168-pound division.
Side pound for pound list. Have a look at it. I have most of the undisputed champions, if not all of them, on there. Josh Taylor was undisputed, but now due to some
no, you don't. You don't have Oleksandr Usyk on there, but Oleksandr Usyk is not really on your radar. Anyway.
Yes, he's not. Devin Haney is undisputed. Jermell Charlo is undisputed. Spence and Crawford.
And remember, these are the same guys that always love to debate that Vasily Lomachenko, that he could never be number one pound per pound because he had that loss to Orlando Salido in the second professional fight of his career. Knowing damn well that he was inexperienced at that point in time. But Jermell Charlo, who ended up losing to a fighter that was knocked out in every single fight, every single championship fight, never won a legitimate championship in his career, then only finally won the belt when he beat him in that first match. Apparently, he's top 5 pound per pound. Not only top 5, but top 3. So once again, there's no offense against these channels, but it's very clear that they are pretty much what I said that they were, the Pro Black Fighters League. Okay?
Fighting for undisputed, right? So they don't have Jermell Charlo on their list. They don't have Devin Haney on their list. And now Better BF skips 3 to 4 positions. And again, remember, look at how many people on their list even fight on ESPN. Shakur, Loma, Better BF, Inoue, Crawford used to, Tyson Fury, and Usyk probably will in the near future. So, I mean, pretty much 85% of their list are top-ranked ESPN or ESPN fighters, not necessarily top-ranked.
Well, listen, I do not 100% agree with ESPN's list either. I think that there's a couple of other fighters that you could debate on the list or off the list. But at the end of the day, I mean, Champside's list really is no better. I mean, you have a fighter that has never even won a legitimate belt in his career. So what does that really say about your list? I mean, let's be real. In terms of logic and objectivity, you're not really overall ranking things overall that correctly. But anyway.
So what does all of this mean? It means that there's no consistency.
And keep in mind that, they can say all they want to, and we can say all we want to when it comes down to it. If we want to debate a fighter is more talented than another one or an athlete is more talented than another one. We can sit here and debate, well, Jerron Boots Ennis, I believe that he'll be on the come up. That's cool, but you can't have him there until he actually has results. It just is what it is. It has to be that way. I mean, there's many people now that would debate that Tyson Fury would probably beat Muhammad Ali. Shakur Stevenson was one of those fighters that said that he believes that Tyson Fury would beat Muhammad Ali. And what did they respond with? They said, well, Tyson Fury doesn't have the results of a Muhammad Ali. He overall didn't defend as much. So all of a sudden, that's when results matter. So depending on who you get your ranking from, you have to have consistency. You have to have a sense of logic and objectivity. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that ESPN is always the best for that. But this, a lot of these guys that, from the new media movement that claim overall that, we're just trying to, tell the truth. No, they're not. Once again, they are the Pro Black Fighters League. And I've showed a multitude of examples. I've showed dozens upon dozens of examples. And this is just another one.
It shows that when I put out a pound for pound list, I don't have to keep changing it every week. Should Artur Beterbiev be on the list? There's probably a good case for him to be on the
Well, the pound for pound list can change. I'm not saying that it should change every week, but it could change possibly even every month, because the boxing list, when it comes down to it, and don't get me wrong, there's certain spots to where they're going to have to stay there for a while. But look at how many results have changed. Boxing is not a sport like NBA basketball. It's not a sport overall like that of the NFL or like that of tennis. Boxing is a sport to where, once again, it is an individual sport. And we take a look at basically whoever wins that individual match is out of the better fighter. So it is what it is. Take a look at Dimitri Bivol's win over Canelo Alvarez. Take a look at Devin Haney's win against that of George Kambosos. Take a look at Shakur Stevenson's win over Oscar Valdez. Artur Beterbiev's win over Joe Smith Jr. and the dominant wins that he's had in the past. The boxing pound for pound list is always going to be mixed around a little bit, but the question will be is, overall, is your ranking somewhat logical and objective? Does it actually make sense? And there's no offense against Champside, but when you have fighters overall like Jermell Charlo within your top 3 pound for pound, no, I'm sorry, I can't go with that. Steven Fulton in the top 10, no, I'm sorry. It's very interesting because these are the same guys that said that Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez and Juan Francisco Estrada, that they did not face a lot of great competition, so they can't be on there. But as soon as Steven Fulton arrives down there, all of a sudden he's on there. So it's just very interesting. I believe that he's a little bit bigger than those guys, but anyway. And don't get me wrong, Steven Fulton, very great fighter from what I've seen, or at least a decent fighter. Top 10, no. Sorry, I can't abide by that. He's only a one-weight division champion, and on top of that, he does not have the resume. He would be within my top 20 or top 25, but I really don't see how you legitimately argue that Steven Fulton is really a top 10 pound per pound fighter, just in terms of resume and accomplishments.
This Bivol as well. But I think Devin Haney's a more skilled fighter. They bring what they bring. They're very strong fighters. They're really fundamental. But I think Devin has all of that and more. And I think he showed that. I don't know.
Well, Devin Haney and Artur Beterbiev, for their weight divisions, they pretty much have to be looked at on a similar level. And the reason why that is because Artur Beterbiev has fought decent A-grade fighters. And really, if we're going to go there, Artur Beterbiev probably has a better resume all around than that of Devin Haney. Now, some will say, what are you talking about? George Kambosos ended up defeating Teofimo Lopez, who defeated Vasily Lomachenko. And I get it, but pretty much everyone knew that whichever A-grade fighter was going to face out of George Kambosos next, that he pretty much overall was the holder for those titles. He was not really the real belt holder when it came down to it, in my view. He overall was just a person. He was another Buster Douglas. And listen, that's not me trying to take away credit from Devin Haney. That's not me trying to take credit away from him at all. Like I said, whoever defeated George Kambosos, because, let's also be real, he did defeat Mickey Bay and Lee Selby, 2 decent fighters. So it's not like he's just, a failure. It's not like he's, the worst fighter on earth. He does have some pedigree, but we all knew that George Kambosos, that he was not going to defeat whichever next A-grade fighter that he fought. It wasn't going to happen. He wasn't going to defeat Vasily Lomachenko. He wasn't going to defeat Shakur Stevenson. He wouldn't have defeated Devin Haney. He wouldn't have defeated Gervonta Tank Davis. He wouldn't have defeated any of those guys. To be honest with you, I don't even know if he would have defeated Ryan Garcia. So it is what it is.
Actually think he had to show anything, but he has a masterful jab. But anyway, Devin signs with with Top Rank and ESPN to fight on there for 3 fights, and he holds a position on the pound for pound list for a whole 2 weeks. Then they kick him off. Did he lose or some shit? What did I miss? What happened where Devin Haney comes off of the list as an undisputed champion? But they just can't let Loma go. They can't let Loma go.
Well, I would agree overall with the Lomachenko points. In my view, Lomachenko right now, he should not be on the top 10 pound per pound list. But in terms of Beterbiev, Dimitri Bivol, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, and Jermell Charlo, in my view, they're all kind of melted within that mix right now together. Probably with Dimitri Bivol, just because of the win that he had over Canelo. He probably has to lead the pack in terms of having the highest rank on my pound per pound list. But it's very close.
And in a way is, he's number 2. Which I don't believe in a way is better than Errol Spence.
Well, it's not necessarily all about who's better. It's always, in terms of ranking a pound for pound list, in terms of rankings anywhere, it can be about basically who has the better resume, who's more impactful. Deontay Wilder, I do not believe that Deontay Wilder was better than a certain amount of fighters, but he ended up overall making my top 20 pound for pound list. So once again, what is your pound for pound list really about, sir? Because these same people who allegedly say that, well, I don't think that this guy's better than this guy, those are the same guys that had Deontay Wilder within their top 4, top 5 pound for pound just a few years ago. So what is your pound for pound list really about? And I understand, but once again, results and resume and accomplishments and coming up big in big moments, those always have to be above the skill set and overall this guy looks better than the other guy. Once again, a lot of people will tell you that Anthony Davis looks to be an all-around more skilled player than that of Giannis Antetokounmpo, but you can never put him over Giannis Antetokounmpo. And the reason why that is because Giannis was able to lead his team to an NBA championship. He also was a two-time MVP and also a Defensive Player of the Year award winner. So it just is what it is. It's the same thing with these certain fighters. Now, if you believe that they're next on the come-up, then that's your business. You can make that list, overall and make it into another one. But you can't put certain fighters like a Jermell Charlo or a Stephon Fulton or, especially a Jerome Boutsen, someone who's never even won anything before. You can't put those fighters over fighters that have legitimate substance. You can't do that. It is what it is. But like I said, the pound per pound list right now is very competitive. Once again, my top 5 pound per pound list right now, once again, I pretty much have those 5 fighters locked. Doesn't mean that it'll be like that, forever. Of course, the boxing pound per pound list changes quite a bit. But right now, I have Canelo Alvarez, and this is in no particular order. I have Canelo Alvarez, Oleksandr Usyk, Tyson Fury, Terrence Bud Crawford, and Errol Spence Jr., all within my top 5 pound per pound list. And then if you're talking about the second half, I probably would have Naoya Inoue in there somewhere. Probably a Shakur Stevenson for sure. Devin Haney perhaps. Josh Taylor just because he still is undisputed. And I thought that winning over that of Victor Postal, Jose Ramirez, and Regis Prograis were all very decent wins. So I give him a certain amount of credit for that, as well as Maurice Hooker. So Josh Taylor, he didn't beat Maurice Hooker, but he beat the guy who beat Maurice Hooker. So Josh Taylor is probably still within there, although, because of his last performance, you could debate that maybe he's not, and then that leads us also to Jermell Charlo, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Artur Beterbiev, Dimitri Bivol. All those guys are kind of within the same mix.
I don't believe that. I don't even think he's better than Shakur Stevenson. So all of this weight class stuff, you got to move through different weight classes. No, you don't. They got heavyweights on their pound for pound list. They got guys with multiple losses on their pound for pound list. They got guys they didn't even think to put on their pound for pound list 2 weeks ago on this shit now at number 7. That's a hell of a leap, ain't it? So again,
well, listen, what I'll say is this. The heavyweights have to be ranked a little bit differently than other fighters. It's kind of like if we talk about NBA basketball. People will basically say, like they'll compare LeBron James to a much smaller player, and they'll basically say, oh, well, LeBron James at one point in time, he could defend the 1 through 5, which he never really could. He really only could defend the 1 through 4. But anyways, when it comes down to it, they'll basically say, oh, well, LeBron James, he has to be greater defensively than Gary Payton because he can defend this and this. Well, you can't compare them all necessarily the same, depending on, whichever it is. Now, if you're boxing's number 1 pound for pound, more than likely you are going to have to go through multiple weight divisions. But is it possible for a heavyweight to be the number 1 pound for pound fighter? Yes, I do believe so. You just have to be extraordinarily dominant because the heavyweight fighters, they can't move anywhere. Maybe the best they can do is move the cruiserweight, but even then that's going to be a little bit of a stretch. So I don't think that it's just fair to say, oh, well, we don't put any heavyweights on the pound per pound list because they can't move up in weight. Because the heavyweights in this generation, it is decently talented. So at the end of the day, no, I can't say that just because it's at the heavyweight division that they don't make my top 10 pound per pound list. Now, maybe if we're talking about one of the fighters that are about 115 or, even lower than that, then okay, that may make sense because they really don't have that much of competition there. But the heavyweight division is ripe with a lot of competition at the current moment in time. So Tyson Fury does have to make my top 10 pound per pound list. But if you're a fighter within a division, unless you're an Errol Spence Jr., to where you have capped up so many A-grade names on your resume, or maybe like a Archer B2B, to where, you seem to have done some decent work within your one-weight division. You are going to have to be a multiple weight division champion, more than likely, to somewhat make the top 5, maybe even make the top 10 pound for pound list, at least in certain environments. Anyway,
People may not agree with my order, but I believe I have probably 90% of the right fighters on my list when it comes to.
no, sir, I can't necessarily agree with that. Uh, you know, I understand a little bit why you kind of have certain fighters on your list, but let's also be real. A certain amount of this is more than likely racially motivated as well. Jermell Charlo does not make my top 10 pound per pound list, and I know a lot of people, they're going to cry about that. It just is what it is. No, I cannot have a fighter to where he has one A-grade win in his career, and also at the peak of his career just a few years ago, he ended up losing to a fighter that never even won a legitimate belt and was knocked out, not even overall just lost, was knocked out in every big fight of his career. Every single big fight in his career. So Jermell Charlo cannot be on the same level as a Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Dimitri Bivol, or Artur Beterbiev, in my view. He just can't be. He can't be. So it is what it is. When you talk about Stephon Fulton, very decent fighter, cannot be within my top 10 pound per pound. When we talk about Jerron Boots Ennis, that's pretty much self-explanatory. And Gervonta Tank Davis, even though he is a top 10 pound per pound talent when he is at his best, he has not fought the best of competition, especially within his past few fights, and he really did not put on that much of an impressive performance. He's never been undisputed. He really has never won legitimate belts in any other weight class besides one. Gervonta Tank Davis cannot be on my pound for pound list. Now, what fighters would I personally have on my top 10 pound for pound list here? I would personally have Errol Spence Jr. on here, Terrence Bud Crawford, debatably Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney. And I also would have probably both Naoya Inoue, maybe Josh Taylor. You could debate Josh Taylor off the top 10 pound for pound list just because he did not look that great in his last fight. And he probably should have lost, but it is what it is. Those would be the fighters that I would have there. But anyway.
Skill for skill, weight being indifferent, or, and accomplishments and this or that. I mean, I would still take Boots over a lot of people on their list. I don't give a damn how many trinkets they got. So, anyway.
Well, that's the problem with your list. And you basically overall heard, and accomplishments. That's basically what he said. So, basically what he just said about his list is that it's pretty much a phony list. Because I don't care what list you goddamn got out there. And this is what happens whenever you rank something. It don't matter what it is. This is why Michael Jordan still has to be above LeBron James. This is why Thomas Brady is always going to be over Aaron Rodgers. You have to count accomplishments. I don't give a shit, over how skilled, a person overall looks over them. When we compare resumes, if you don't have the resume, then it really don't matter. It just is what it is. Because there's so many people out there that look like A-grade talents. For those of you that, of course, remember Adrian Broner, when he was on the come-up, he looked extraordinarily talented. There were so many people that were saying that he would be the future number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. And then look what happened to him. So it is what it is. You cannot put a fighter like Jerron Boots Ennis on your top 10 pound-for-pound list. It's impossible. I'm not putting him on there until he does something. Okay, and that's with any fighter.
Let me know what y'all think about Devin Haney being removed. He just fought on June 5th. Today's the 22nd, and he's out of there. Press 1? That's the first press 1 of this video. It was so damn serious.
Hey, art of war, baby. Deception. Let them believe. Wow! They cut him off! Oh, my God! They cut him off! He said too much, press 1.
Which just lends to my point that I was making as some of you blinded or short-sighted people called in to tell me, oh, I would have number 2 instead of number 1, and I would have this person number 10 instead of that person number 10. Like, first of all, who cares who's number 10? And
well, your list does have to be consistent, sir. And it has to actually make sense. And this list is no offense against your list, but that list is really, it's pretty much a shit list as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you have a few fighters on the list, not even just one. you have a few fighters, probably 5 fighters, that I would not even personally have on my top 10 pound for pound list. So it is what it is. Of course, some though would debate that some of them are debatable, like Devonta Tank Davis and Jermell Charlo, but they do not personally make my top 10 pound for pound.
And I say that knowing that they had.
Now, is that me saying that that they could not maybe be debated there, or that if they get one more decent win, that maybe they could not be there? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. They certainly are very decent fighters, but once again, you have to really overall go by resume and accomplishments, and overall, the resume of the fighter and who they beat. And I'm sorry, but when I just take a look at Jermell Charlo, he really does not have an A+ resume.
Devin, number 10, I have him in my top 5. But my point is this. He should get that recognition at the least where he's fighting, where he just became undisputed. At the bare minimum, he should get that recognition.
I would certainly give Devin Haney, in my view, more recognition than that of a Jermell Charlo. But anyway.
See, before they was doing ties on there, tie for 10, well, they should have let him do a tie then. Because to leave him off there.
And I believe that Brian Gastano was actually a better all-around fighter than what George Kambosos was. But Devin Haney, not only is he undefeated, but he's completely undisputed. And overall, he did beat George Kambosos, who beat Teofimo Lopez. Brian Gastano, who I do believe actually is a better fighter than that of George Kambosos. The problem is that Jermell Charlo looked like shit, in my opinion, in the first fight, where he probably should have lost 8 rounds to 4. That probably was not one of the worst decisions. I'm not going to say the worst decision that I've ever seen, but in my view, that probably was a little bit skewed too much in Jermell Charlo's favor. And on top of that, you lost to a C-grade fighter in Tony Harrison a few years ago, so nah.
Just inexcusable. So let me know what y'all think. Follow us on Instagram at champ_side. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at the Champside. Visit the website, champside.com for the...
But anyways, that's really about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about this top 10 pound per pound list because it's always very important to rank things off of substance, accomplishments, and most importantly, the resume. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see overall what ends up happening with some of these fighters a little bit later on and what they're able to accomplish, because boxing, I believe, is in a very good spot at the current moment in time. It's very competitive across several weight divisions, and you have a lot of great fighters to where it's going to be very exciting to watch and see what's going to be upcoming. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.